Hey, I'm Jeff Glucker and you're watching Autotrader, and today I am joined by Lyn Woodward from the KBB side of the family. And if you don't know who this is, that's on you first of all, but also she is a great writer, a great video host, and a good friend, and we also own first-gen Monteros.
Aren't we smart? It's great to be here, Jeff. Thanks for having me. Mostly I'm excited because we have two SUVs that we get to talk about and compare. I brought a Ford Bronco Sport Badlands. Jeff brought a Jeep Cherokee Trailhawk, and we're going to see how they stack up.
Well, first I think we should jump in this one and learn more about it.
Let's do it.
All right.
So we're in the Ford Bronco Sport right now. Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind for me is how historically and traditionally, like, off-road spectacular the Bronco is.
Yeah.
When you're looking at, especially at its numbers. So this one actually has pretty good departure and approach angles. I think we're, what, 30 inches up front and 33 in the back?
Yeah, 30 degrees up front, 30 degrees, 33 plus in the back, which is great for any vehicle,
yeah.
Really.
The breakover is not as good. I think it's at about 20.9. But you know what, I think with a car like this especially, you're not going to be going over massively huge stuff, and if you just pick a good line,
yeah,
you're pretty good.
You could angle it.
Yeah.
And it's not terrible. It gets the job done. It's better than, like, it's better than a Gladiator, right? I think. Or it's right near a Gladiator.
Yeah.
And then you can actually opt for different tires, because these are the base tires, but you can get Falcon Wild Peaks, which give you a tiny bit more, or better breakover, better ground clearance, and all that stuff.
I think actually if you are going to do a lot of off-roading, probably better to go with that tire. You're going to get a lot more sidewall, you're going to get a lot more tread. It's going to be a lot more durable for you. I don't think it's going to drive as well on road as the Scorpions do, which are the stock tires on the with the Pirellis, but you know what? If you're willing to kind of make that sacrifice, then you probably don't care. And
the Wild Peak is actually a good tire on road as far as real all-terrain tires go. The Pirelli Scorpion is a better on-road tire, but like you said, if I'm going off-road, if I'm buying one of these and I'm getting the Badlands, I want to get it dirty, I'm going with the Wild Peaks. Plus, the wheels that you can get with that one look cooler too.
Yeah, and really, I mean, let's face it, it's all about cool wheels.
Yes.
So let's talk about the powertrain on this for a second. So on the base Bronco Sport, you get a 1.5 liter 3-cylinder turbocharged engine, which is decent. But on the Badlands, you automatically get the 2-liter EcoBoost engine, which is good for 250 horsepower.
Yes. 277 torque. Great combination. The gearbox does a good job of metering out the power. And I will give credit though, because I'm shocked at the 3-cylinder. It's way better than I thought it would, down at like 180, 181 horsepower. I've driven an Outer Banks model on this very trail, and it was great. I had no problems at all. And the higher up that particular day, because this is the tallest point in Orange County, California, there was actually snow halfway up.
Oh, wow.
And it was fantastic. But if I was buying one, the EcoBoost all the way, 250 horsepower, absolutely.
Yeah, I think also that added torque is really going to help you if you are doing really tricky off-road stuff. That low-end torque that you want when you're kind of going up like steep obstacles is really, really handy.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so this one doesn't have a true transfer case, so we don't have a true 4-low, but they have the rear drive unit, which basically gives this its all-wheel drive, its 4-wheel drive setup, really all-wheel drive, but a nicely designed all-wheel drive. But I think the big distinguisher here in the Badlands has to be the Haas.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the suspension system that that Ford has put on this, and so you get it's open front and rear, so independent front and rear suspension, which obviously gives you the comfort on the road that you want. But I will say, like, the suspension really, you're really comfortable. On the road, you're ridiculously comfortable.
Yeah.
I just did a video for KBB that just talks about how this does on road, and I was really surprised at how comfortably it rides. And yet, when we're on this kind of stuff, it's gravelly, it's bumpy. Again, I'm really feeling comfortable. It almost feels close to air suspension to me.
They did a really good job, and it's different from the other ones because this one gets different knuckles, different suspension tuning, 46 mil monotube rear shocks. It just gets a host of upgrades to make it better for what we're doing, not even to mention, you know, the skid plates underneath and all that good stuff. Ford really took their engineering know-how with other vehicles and applied it here on the Badlands, so that there's people, when I first reviewed one of these, who are like, it's just an Escape, right? No. They don't understand that vehicles, very different vehicles, can ride on the same platform and give you totally different driving experiences. This is nothing like an Escape. You wouldn't take an Escape up here. Not that this is some advanced trail, but there are some sections where it would be very uncomfortable in an Escape and in lesser vehicles. It's very different tuning and design and engineering going on underneath, even though the platform is the same platform. So this is much more geared towards what we're doing today, and you can be comfortable and confident off-road, and that just makes your day better.
Yeah, well, and that's why they call it a global platform. That's why it's so efficient, is because it's so flexible and it can do so many different things.
Yeah.
So while we're speaking about off-road stuff, let's go into the modes, the GOAT modes that are the drive modes of the Bronco Sport. Now, GOAT, of course, if you're a sports person, it usually can mean greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Or if you're talking about video hosts and you're talking about me,
right, the GOAT.
You would say the GOAT.
You're the Tom Brady of
greatest of all time. But in this case, it means go over all terrain, which I think is actually pretty appropriate. Now, for the base Bronco Sport, you're going to get 5 modes. Normal, eco, sport, those are great when you're on road, but you're also going to get mud and sand and slippery, which are good if you live in inclement weather and you have that kind of stuff to do. But in the Badlands, you're going to get 2 extra ones. One is mud and ruts, right?
Mud and ruts.
Mud and ruts. They call them all these different things. Mud and ruts and rock crawl. And what those 2 extra modes do is really, really equip you for off-road stuff, especially the rock crawl, which not only engages that, let's call it as close to a 4x4 setup as you're going to get with this system, but it also automatically locks the rear differential for you, so you're going to get a lot more grip in the back.
It's a smart system. The naming, you could take it either way. It's a little bit goofy. It's a little bit fun at the same time, so I get it. Let's have some fun with our vehicles. GOAT mode, you're going to get it in the big Bronco too, and I think it works. It's smart, and I like that they give you more in the Badlands because you're spending more. What is the base price on one of these? Base price
on the Badlands is $33. The one that we're testing right now, we've got a lot more bells and whistles on it, and this comes in at around $38. Yeah, and that includes destination.
I was surprised to see leather in this one because I know the cloth seat that comes with them, they're really nice. I prefer to not have leather, though I like this upper suede cowboyish part right here.
But when you're off-roading, cloth is the way to go as far as I'm concerned.
I'm team cloth all the way. When you get in it, when it's hot, it doesn't burn your legs and back. And yeah, it holds you in place nicely. I don't care for leather in my vehicles unless it's like something luxurious where you're like, okay, it's soft leather. But in general, cloth all the way. And then to get that, I believe it's part of the Badlands package, which is on top of the Badlands model to get other stuff. And that's one problem I have with this vehicle, is that if you want the upgraded sound system, which I like good tunes in my vehicle, the upgraded B&O sound system, you have to check that box. You can't just get that with the cloth. So if you want that, you have to get the leather, and that's kind of annoying to me. And I understand why automakers package things to make things more easy at the dealer level and for the consumer level, but I almost wish we could go back to some cherry picking like you used to be able to back in the day. Maybe that makes things tougher on the actual production lines, but it would be nice to get a base Badlands with the better stereo, so that while I'm enjoying the most aggressive Badlands with the optional, extra wheels and tires, and then a pumping stereo, I'm living my best life off-road and not burning my butt on leather.
Absolutely. So there was one thing that we didn't talk about as far as the Badlands and off-road package, and that's the trail control system.
Sure.
Which is basically like an off-road, let's call it a cruise control.
Yeah.
So when you're going up a hill, you can set it so that it's going at a set speed, and it's sort of basically navigating for you as far as the throttle control, so you're able to really focus on the obstacles that are in front of you. It's a good system for me. I don't know about you with this. I personally, that and hill descent control, I don't always use them very often because I tend to like to be in control.
Right.
Working on my pedal control, especially when I'm rally driving, is something that's really important. Left foot braking is really important too.
Yeah.
But for someone who's maybe not as familiar or just kind of you know, going out and having a fun joyride, those can be really great systems.
Yeah, I think it's a good system in certain maybe trickier situations that we're never going to get into it where we would need it today. I like that it works forward and reverse, up to 20 miles per hour forward, up to 6 in reverse, and it is a smart system. So the Bronco Sport Badlands has a lot going on, but we have another competitor in this group. I think it's time we hop in the Jeep and see what's up.
I think we should.
Cool. All right, so now we are in the Jeep. This is the Jeep Cherokee Trailhawk, and we no longer have turbo power. We have a V6, a 3.2 liter, cranking out 271 horsepower and 239 pound-feet, which on paper sounds great because that's more than the Bronco.
But you know, sometimes that horsepower, it doesn't necessarily translate in the way that you think it does.
Right.
And the way that I think the Jeep is a little handicapped is this one weighs in close to 4,200 pounds, whereas the Bronco Sport Badlands probably closer to about 3,700 pounds.
That's a big difference.
That is a huge difference, so I would love to do the math on the power to weight ratio. If someone wants to go and do that for me and write it in the comments, that'd be amazing. But I'm gonna say that they probably level out.
Spoiler alert, the Bronco's quicker. I think the 0 to 60 is like 5.9, and on this it's 7.6. We're also dealing with a 9-speed automatic instead of an 8-speed, but that's probably negligible in the grand scheme of things, and maybe even could potentially give this one better fuel economy in theory on the highway, though again, back to the weight, I don't think it does. We do, however, have a real 4-wheel drive system.
That's right.
We have a transfer case. We can go into 4 low. We have a much more aggressive crawl ratio, whereas on the Bronco Sport, it's 18 to 1, and here it's like 51 to 1 if you go full 4 low. So if you actually want to do some more hardcore stuff, maybe the Trailhawk does get an edge there. And the Trailhawk, as standard, does come with some nicer features if you want a more luxurious thing. You have heated seats and heated steering wheel are now standard on this. In terms of driving modes, we've got 5 to the GOAT mode 7. I'm gonna look down to cheat. We have auto, snow, sport, sand and mud, and rock. And I think it's kind of funny that it goes snow and then sport. Sport should be the first twist on the dial.
Yeah.
But when I was just driving it around for the week I've spent with it, I've just left it in auto. Here, I've moved it to sand and mud. Again, that whole confusing, which one do you put it in?
So the one thing that I will say about this vehicle, I think for Jeep, a lot of the times, you know, the Wrangler gets a lot of kudos for being the super uber off-road vehicle. But you know, if you are looking for something that is a little bit less expensive, that perhaps does drive a little bit better on the road, then I mean, I have taken the Cherokee on some pretty aggressive trails in Death Valley, and it 100% did everything that the Wrangler could do. I just needed to pick a line more carefully. You only get about 8.7 inches of ground clearance here, so you're not looking at like something like the 11, which you get in the Rubicon, but it's still very, very capable. And
we talked about the tires on the Bronco Sport. This comes standard with 245, because you know we're not talking about 31, 33, 35 inch tires. So 245 section width, Firestones, which is again a compromised tire like on the Bronco Sport, where it's a mix of on-road drivability and capable all-terrain. So if you wanted this to get even more rugged, which is the same case for the Bronco Sport, you could go aftermarket and do like we both are fans of KO2s. Toyo Open Countries are fine. Falcon Wild Peaks, which are optionally available on the Bronco Sport. Something if you needed more. Even a taller tire would give you slightly more ground clearance and all that other stuff, even though it's already good. So I think, plus this has red tail hooks, which everybody knows means off-road hero. I will say, driving up the hill, the Bronco Sport felt more comfortable.
100%.
Is that translating to your seat?
100%, yeah. I mean, to me, again, when I was, you know, in the Bronco Sport, I almost felt like we had sort of something akin to the air suspension in the Defender, which was very comfortable. It's sort of, you ride over, and I'm sure you can see from us jostling around in here, you ride over those bumps so much more smoothly.
And I'm going slower because of that. It's a little bit more roughshod, it's a little stiffer, which maybe helps in gnarlier, more aggressive terrain, but just cruising on this road in general, I would rather be in the Ford right now.
Which again, if you are buying this vehicle, you're probably not a hardcore off-roader. You want this as some kind of a mixed medium. You are going to do some maybe on the weekends, but that's not your main purpose with this vehicle. So keep that in mind.
You would get a Wrangler. I mean, if you're a Jeep fan and you want to go true off-road, you'd get a Wrangler. And you can get one for this price because, you know, lower price Wranglers are obtainable.
Yeah.
But speaking of price, this thing starts at around $35, so that's over the Bronco Sport starting price. And as tested, this one's $42.
Yeah, I actually went to the website and built my own yesterday, and with all of the bells and whistles, I mean, I was really surprised that you were definitely into the 40s.
That's crazy. That's so much money. So you can get a fully spec'd out Badlands with stuff I don't even want on it and stay under 40.
Yeah.
The actual Badlands I want is between 35 and 37.
So the other thing that I'm going to say that I noticed coming from that car into this one, and we didn't really talk about it there because there was nothing to compare it to yet, but even just looking at the interior of this car, there are things about it, especially the front dash, the screen, the way that the vents are kind of styled around this. It feels a little bit dated to me.
Sure.
You know, I like the integrated screen.
Yeah.
I've always preferred that to one that's just sort of like smacked on the top of it.
Right. And Uconnect is a great system. Uconnect is a really good system. I think graphically this is nicer than Ford's system.
Yeah. They're both, I mean, to me, they're both pretty intuitive.
Yeah.
They're very integrated with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so that's fantastic too. There is a nice ratio here of buttons to touchscreen, same with on the Bronco Sport. Although in my review, I did feel like there were a lot of buttons on the steering wheel on the Bronco Sport.
Yeah.
It kind of felt a little like Formula One, but you know.
There's a fair bit here too.
So I guess your thumbs get used to those after a while when you're just used to pushing all the buttons.
And speaking of, this is something that's a Chrysler thing that I'm very used to when I drive these vehicles. I do appreciate the two switches behind on the back of the steering wheel.
Yes.
And I pretty much mainly use those for changing track with your left hand and changing volume with your right hand. And if you're off-roading, you have both hands on, you can crank the volume.
The funny thing about those is I used to have a Buick and it didn't have paddle shifters, but I always felt very cool when I was adjusting the volume and changing the channel because it made me feel like I was paddle shifting.
Yes, 100%.
That's so dumb.
So I think we have a good idea of how we feel about both of these. I think we should head back down to the trail where we left the Bronco and really suss it out.
Sounds good. So we've driven both of these and we have a pretty good sense of what they do. We've talked about the inside, we've talked about how they drive. The one thing we haven't talked about yet is how they look. And for me, this is the most subjective thing, but I think at first glance to me, pretty obvious. I look at the Cherokee, it looks a little bit dated to me at this point. But then I come over here and I look at the Bronco Sport and I really do applaud Ford for really leaning into that sort of boxy history, the retro look. There has not been a time when I've been driving down the highway that I've seen one of these that I haven't turned my head and gone, oh, what?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's a Bronco Sport. I really don't do that with the Cherokee.
No, and so I get the Jeep heritage here. I appreciate the 7-slot grills, even though it looks forced on this. I like the red tail hooks because that means super duper off-roader, which is, I mean, I'm kidding, but they do look good against the black of the bumper. However, that said, for me, subjectively, the Bronco is the winner. I love that this ties into the larger Bronco. The headlights look great, the stack looks great. One thing that is cheesy about the styling though, which they've stolen from Jeep, are the Easter eggs.
Yeah, if you look way at the back on the glass hatch, there's a little bitty like vintage Bronco that's awfully reminiscent of the little bitty Wrangler decals that they have kind of all over the place. So listen, the thing that I appreciate about that though is Ford and Jeep are really pushing each other.
Yes.
And anytime one person does something, it just sort of engenders like, how do we get this better? How do we make this better? And I think then everybody wins.
So I think the full-size Bronco is going to push the Wrangler to be even better, and I hope that the Bronco Sport pushes the Cherokee to evolve to something awesome.
So who wins for you on this one right now as things stand?
I think it's pretty obvious here. If I had to spend my own money on either one of these, no question for me. This isn't like it's Bronco Sport.
Well, you'd be spending less money.
I'd be spending less.
And on some levels, you'd be getting more.
I'd be getting a less powerful vehicle, but one that is somehow quicker, weighs less. I think it has a little bit more room, though. The size comparison is tougher on this one because this one's a little bit bigger. We're comparing them more because of the power.
So you can tow more with the Cherokee if you get the optional
tow package. Jumps it to 4,500 pounds of towing, which is pretty good.
Which is great. However, ride comfort in this, on-road, off-road, is, I mean, to me, it's superb.
Yeah, I really like the Bronco Sport in all guises. I said even the 3-cylinder is surprisingly good. I would get a Badlands. It's a no-brainer to me. This is a fantastic vehicle. This can do really, really, really good off-road. This is better overall.
Yeah, I'd agree.
High five.
High five.
That was like a Micah thing.
Yeah. Who's Micah?